Right, today I'm talking to Tony Harlow, bass
Hello.
player, teacher. I've known Tony a number of years. Hello, Tony.
Hello.
You're better to explain what you do than me sort of just saying, so maybe you can tell the listeners what.
Well, years ago I was a session player and I did a lot of touring work and international work, mostly on the continent and in Ireland. And then, because of various health problems over the years, I went into teaching primarily. And these days I teach instrumentally. I've lectured in music, and I've taught from pretty much most levels at some point.
Yeah.
And these days I say just. I teach instrumentally at various schools and colleges, and sometimes I used to do master classes. These days I don't do so much of that because
Right.
obviously my playing is not what it used to be because I've got arthritis, so I've reduced my playing, but I've increased my teaching and my sort of academic work, I suppose, with students.
So let's go back to the very beginning then, Tony. Tell me a little bit about how you got involved playing. What was the first thing that sort of turned you onto music?
It's an old. I suppose in some ways it's very obvious. It's what a lot of guys do. When I was about 13, I had my Iron Maiden T-shirt, and I decided that I wanted to be the next sort of heavy metal, sort of rock god,
Yeah.
as most 13-year-olds do.
Yeah.
And decided I was going to form a band with my friends at school, and started that. The band never actually happened, but it's one of those odd synchronicities in life, because as I was learning to play, I remember going to my parents and saying, can I have the money or some of the money towards buying a guitar? And I remember my parents said, my mother, I remember this, said, if you pay for the instrument, I'll pay for your lessons. I said, okay, fine. She said, I know a chap round the corner who's a guitar teacher. Now, when you're 13 and your mum tells you there's a guy around the corner who she knows and whose mum she knows who's a guitar teacher, I thought this was going to be desperately depressing and uncool. And he turned out to be an LA session player who'd just lost his green card from America and had come back to the UK.
Wow.
So from the moment I had my first lesson,
Yeah.
I was taught by real highfalutin American session players. So my first experience of music was from an extraordinarily high level, and I didn't spend any time stumbling or noodling. I was trained
That's really interesting.
from the start to be a session player almost.
Right. That is interesting. Because that's a completely different perspective for most people, as you say.
Mm.
You know, so it really sort of frames your way of thinking about music, doesn't it, right from the outset?
It was a professional focus, it was an industry focus, and it was the whole American approach to music, and the LA approach was ground into me from the start, and this whole idea of forming a rock band and being sort of this sort of teenage rock star just went. And immediately I wanted to be a great musician,
Right.
and I wanted to be the best I could be as a player.
Right.
And stardom just went out the window. I was not interested in stardom. I wanted just to be a phenomenally good musician, and that was my big focus.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. So, how long did you carry on having lessons then? Or did that, you
Well,
know,
on and off for years.
what, with the same person?
The same person was a chap called Paul Murphy.
Paul Murphy, yeah.
Paul, who was a phenomenal musician and tutor, and I was with Paul on and off as a tutor and then as a friend, kind of a mentor, for probably about 10 years, from about 24. But in between that there were other milestone moments. A big one was when I went to the Bass Institute of Technology, when it used to be in Shepherd's Bush. This is back in the mid 80s, about 87. And when I was there, I had lessons with people like Jack Bruce and John Entwistle and Tim Landers, Rob Burns. So there was a tremendous buzz, and of course the bass guitar in that era, in the mid to late 80s, was an incredibly cool instrument. It really was the instrument of the moment.
Yeah.
And it was phenomenally inspiring to be around people like that and have a focus all the time on music, not on fame, stardom, the haircut. It was all about being a musician. So that was a big influence when we was the Institute. And then I remember when you spoke to my wife as a guitar teacher, Jo, on another one of these, about pieces of music, and I was thinking about this last night, knowing I was going to come and see you today. And there is no one particular piece of music that influenced me or changed my life, but there are moments of certain musicians. There are 3 albums that I wore out 3 copies on vinyl, and they were Toto 4, Heavy Weather by Weather Report, and Donald Fagen's Nightfly. And it's just steeped in muso, isn't there?
Absolutely.
And that's what I listened to as a teenager. So it's not surprising I didn't fit in at school, because I'm listening to. And I remember the first time I heard Birdland, the first time I heard Jaco Pastorius, it was a revelation. And I still remember to this moment being in my bedroom at 14, putting on the record, and this friend of mine saying, "You've got to hear this bass player. You've got to hear this." And I remember hearing the harmonics on the intro, and thinking, "Well, that's a bass. This is what I want to do. This is it." And it was hearing Jaco. Now, I remember there was a really interesting question that was asked at the bass weekend back in the 80s by Rob Burns to the whole group. There were about 200 of us there, many professional players and many of that point students. And they said there are only 2 reasons why people choose to play bass. And he said, "I'm going to ask you, and we're going to see what the response was." And he said the 2 reasons are: 1, no one else in the band wanted to play it, so I took it up; or 2, I heard Jaco. And the interesting thing was, I would say 90% of the people in that room filled one of those 2 categories. It was either because no one else would do it, or because they heard Jaco, or then Marcus Miller or Stanley Clarke, and that sort of changed their life and their perspective musically.
That's interesting. So let's. I'm quite intrigued by that, because it's, to me, it's like the path that you ended up following. You sort of fell into that because of what your mother suggested, which which actually, from a parental point of view, it was a really good
spot on
deal, absolutely spot on, and the fact that the guy around the corner was who it was made a lot of difference.
Sometimes your parents tell you the truth when you're a teenager.
Yeah. Well, they do. It's just whether you realise that it's the truth, or whether it's palatable. I think that's more the point, isn't it? So, after you did the bass centre thing, were you playing? Were you actually playing in any bands particularly, or you were?
Yeah, I was playing in I remember there was it's ages ago. There was a fusion band, kind of jazz funk band called Q-Tangle, up in London. We had a couple of residencies.
That's a great name.
Q-Tangle. Yeah, I mean, this was, because this would have been 87, 88. We had a residency at the Brahms and Liszt in London.
Yeah.
And there was another residency somewhere else. So I was playing twice a week up in town, just playing really self-indulgent jazz funk and fusion stuff. Lots of slap solos.
Yeah.
And I remember because that was where I met Billy Cobham.
Yeah.
And Darryl Jones and all the guys, because I'd been doing demo work at the British Music Fair up in Olympia.
Yeah.
And they were on the stand next to me on another
really?
stand. And I was like, wow.
How could they fit a Billy Cobham's drum kit?
Well, it was the whole band. It was basically Miles Davis's backing band and him.
God.
And I did my little bit. I was on the small stage. So I was 100 yards away, you know. I was just a grunt, just doing my bit. And I saw them, and I remember I went over and chatted to them after they'd done their bit. And they said, "Oh, this is great. We're all going out for pizza. Do you want to come for pizza?" And I said, "Oh, I'd love to, but I've got a gig to do. I've got a residency in the Brahms and Liszt in Covent Garden, so I can't make it." And they said, "Well, that's all right. We'll come and see you. We'll come and check you out."
Okay.
And I thought, yeah, right, of course you will.
Yeah.
So I got in my car and I drove from Olympia down to Covent Garden. I did the gig, and the first number in the set was a big sort of Stanley Clarke bass solo where I could just indulge my ego. And I remember stepping forwards, and it's a very low ceiling. And from what I remember, it's a basement club. I don't know what it's like now. I'm going back 35 years. I stepped forward for my solo, and I looked to the end of the room, and there was one of the Marcellus brothers. I can't remember which one. Darryl Jones, Omar Hakim, all the boys were there.
God.
Billy Cobham wasn't. I mean, I don't remember him.
Yeah, but Omar Hakim's
yes,
good enough.
I bottled it.
Yeah.
I couldn't take the solo. I stood back and the guitar player took it. I was about 18 or 19 and I just bottled it. I couldn't,
Right.
you know, I can't remember who it was. I think it was Greg Felenganes.
Yeah.
It was somebody really immense. I mean, going back, that's 35 years. But it was that band, and half of them were there watching. They stayed for a couple of numbers and then left. I didn't speak to them. But there were moments like that you think, wow, I'm almost there.
Yeah.
I'm meeting these people.
That's an interesting thing. I want to pick up on that a bit because that's. There's a lot of things that sort of come out in conversations where you get the lucky break.
Yeah.
And several of the interviews I've done have featured these sort of strange meetings, you know, on a street corner where you bump into somebody who just turns around and says, "Oh, look, you know, so and so's in need of a guitarist, drummer, whatever," you know, and that begins the sort of their career off, you know, a chance meeting or
often
a
it
chance,
is.
yeah. So and then you get the other things, and this certainly happened to me, where you get that sort of whiff of this is happening, and then it just dissipates.
Oh yes, yes.
Right, and I'm also interested in that as well, how that happens, because that happened. As I say, that happened to me with one project I did, and it was like it was all there, all just ready to go, and it's like, well, this can't possibly fail, and then somebody was ill, and that was it. And it just literally fell apart.
I think some of it is a conscious decision. I mean, I think the reason why I stopped a lot of the touring work and the big studio work I was doing at one point was I was doing it all very young.
Yeah.
I mean, by 21, I'd played a 40,000 seat arena. I'd been live on TV all over Europe. I'd done really well in a very short space of time. But I was looking at the guys I was working with, and they were my age, our age now, in 40s, 50s, and on their third or fourth marriage with a drink problem, never lived at home. It was a life on the... And I thought it's too easy. If I don't do something...
Well, I know a lot of married people who've got a drink problem anyway, so I don't necessarily... It's the same.
Do you know what I mean? It was like, a lot of people... It's very damaging to you, that lifestyle.
Yeah, it is.
And unless you're particularly strong as a person, and I don't think I probably was, I think it can be very destructive. And I consciously decided I'm going to stop doing this. It's too easy. I'm going to blink, and that's going to be me.
Right. Yeah.
You know, without anywhere to live, and I've just been living on the road for years and years, and lots of great stories, but nothing solid in your life. So at that point, I went off. I stopped and went to university, and I went to Cambridge for a year, which I found very unpleasant. I didn't fit in at the college I was at, didn't like it at all, and I transferred to the Leeds College of Music, City of Leeds College of Music, and this would be in my mid-20s, which was great. That was in the days when Professor Bill Kinghorn was the head of the course, and it was an extraordinarily good course. Then, unfortunately, I collapsed and was given 6 months to live, and I spent the next year in hospital being rebuilt, and that just stopped dead my touring work and everything. And then I became really a full-time teacher, and that's when I met you, and we did gigs in Kent, and I kind of went from very big gigs
to very small ones.
to smaller ones. But then you see, in between that, I remember doing things like, oh God, playing on the cabaret circuit.
Yeah.
Oh, that was great.
You didn't do that with me.
No. Doing
good job.
Yeah, caravan parks in November. The money was really good, and you could play every night. And because I was playing for a living, you just have to go where the work is and where the money is.
Yeah. That's interesting, because I didn't know all of the stuff of what you were doing earlier on. I mean, you told me a few of the stories, but it's nice to sort of get that sort of the background of what you did, because I think obviously, well, we know one another reasonably well, I would say. I think for me, this sort of search for, I don't want to say the sort of, it's like the mystery, if you like, of what music is, or what it entails, or what it does, has always fascinated me. And the fact that different people can have such different trajectories into music, right? And this is becoming quite apparent with the people that I've been interviewing. And before this, I used to do a lot of NLP type interviews with people. That was only my own research, And you realise there's something very odd going on, and people's perceptions about how they hear things, how they see the creative processes, and it's not the sort of thing that generally, it's not the stuff that's taught within college courses or even schools or whatever, because you can't write it down on a piece of paper. You can't create a teaching plan based on somebody's perception of what's going on when they're playing, because it's so weird. And so you're probably the most distinct version of somebody that you could go, that I've come across, that you can go, right, that's the drill.
Yes.
Right? That's the drill. That's what we do. I've got to practice X amount of hours on this, and I've got to get my, picking right hand finger technique up to so many BPM, right? And that obviously is borne out by the way that you came into that.
Yeah, I was trained, not taught, almost.
Yes. So the point that I come from, obviously a very different perspective.
Yeah.
Totally different from you. And I think probably this will be different with drummers, I must say. That a lot of the drummers that I know, not all of them, but a lot of them, that obviously have had had a level of training, would be more in your ballpark, I would say.
Drummers are, interestingly enough, more technically minded. I've tended to find, of all the musicians I tend to work with best, it's always drummers, but then I'm a bass player primarily, so I
but I think,
get drawn that way.
But the thing is, it's the attitude of mind. It's not so much, because obviously, you're a bass player, so you're going to be drawn to drummers, because whatever the guitarist is doing is irrelevant, really, as far as you guys are concerned, because you're the engine room, right? So whatever the captain on the bridge is doing, or all the people working on the deck, you're not interested in what they're doing, because you're in the engine room, right? Okay? And I think that tends to be the sort of thing that goes on within a band, which, again, certainly when you've done blues camp, that's always the perspective that you've got to try and put across, that you do actually have to listen to everybody else, but the biggest problem is no one is really listening to the bass player or the drummer when they should be, that should be their sole area of focus, from the point of where's the energy coming from in this song, right?
Yeah, it's interesting you say energy. I remember doing a workshop with you at the blues camp years and years ago on blues soloing. That's when I was playing 6-string bass, and one of the questions you asked was,
what bloody scale are you playing?
No,
I wasn't. I didn't ask that.
It was just a blues scale. All
of course. I know a lot of scales, everyone. Too many. Go on.
So I've lost my thread.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah, do the blues camp thing.
Yes, energy. And one of the things that I said was, with soloing, a lot of it is about having a certain energy. It's a certain speed and deftness, and that there's a bounce to a certain finesse of speed and playing, an energy which I absolutely love getting as a bass player. Certainly if you're playing straight 16s, so you get that. There is an energy to that kind of rhythm that is, I find it quite infectious to play to. Yeah.
But there again, that might come from your liking for Bach.
Yeah, well, it could. Yes, Uncle Johann, to those of us who studied him as long.
yeah, exactly. Because there is that mathematical aspect.
Bach is the governor.
Yeah.
He is the governor. And I remember one of my tutors saying to me years ago, he said, you look at a score of J.S. Bach, and he said, there's a stamp of authority. You just look at it and go, well, yes, of course. You can't
sort of look at it and go, I think that guy got the wrong note there. I think he really meant to do this.
Yes.
No, that's right. I think that's the That's the point.
Bach is the governor, but he is all about structure. There is emotion there, but he's primarily a structuralist. But bass is a structural instrument.
Yeah.
At the same time, you've got to have that passion for pure expression. If you look at the start of Romanticism, Beethoven and that kind of thing. I've got a great love for Beethoven, even though his birthday. And
do you? Sure.
yeah, same birthday. Yes, I'm really drawn to Beethoven and Bach. And if you think about the Russian school and the five, they based all Russian classical music on a combination of Bach and Beethoven.
Yeah.
You can't go far wrong with that. And in terms of contemporary music, you think about bass playing. There's kind of a holy trinity. There's the three great bassists: Jacko, Marcus Miller, Stanley Clarke. Anybody after that is a different level almost. And I'm making a huge sweeping generalisation there, obviously, but
I think the thing is with Jacko, and the three that you sort of Stanley Clarke and Marcus Miller. You can look at Larry Graham and stuff like that.
Oh,
and go,
yeah.
This guy came up with the idea, and then it gets to a point where there's a technical aspect where it all sort of comes together, and then after that it's really difficult to get it better than that unless you do something else.
Yes.
And I think you could look at that. There must be some parallels with guitar, but obviously the guitar's got so many other things going with it that there are other aspects. Like, is that music being influenced by blues? Is it being influenced by rock and roll, or is it being influenced by jazz, or is it being influenced by flamenco? So there's all these other things coming in where you can go, okay, you could cite Hendrix, or you could cite whoever, Steve Vai or whatever, as being whatever it is in that genre, right? And then you go like, well, when it goes after that, oh.
Where do you go after
where's it going? Yeah. So there there's something within that once you get to a particular sort of level on a style, it's like, well, it's only really the same thing but voiced in a different way. Unless you come out with something different.
What you can do with it, and because bass playing essentially, bottom line, it's down to groove.
Yeah.
You can look at a bass player like, say, somebody like Tony Levin. Now, Tony Levin, he coasts, he takes it very simple, doesn't go for very complicated parts a lot of the time. Killer sense of groove. And so he's taken that kind of, the Jacko, the Marcus Miller thing, that very technical, and he's reduced it just to a very raw element, which is basic groove playing. He's still a great player, Tony Levin, because what he's done is he's simplified it. So you can get these steps backwards because of technique in itself is not a means to an end. It is a means to an end, but it's not the final thing. As there was Aristotle, I think, said we're all in a state of becoming, never being, and it's the same with
that music. To talk. No, I'm joking.
So, I suppose,
yeah. So tell me a little bit about the teaching thing, because this is an interesting. I think to some extent a dilemma for a lot of people who are performers or session players that get involved in teaching. Some people have a bit of a problem with that transition. There's certainly things that I've picked out, not necessarily from guitarists actually. I've heard things from other musicians. It's almost like, well, if I had the work, I wouldn't be doing the teaching. You see what I mean?
For me, actually, straight the other way. I actually
prefer
teaching.
Yeah, I know. I'm being devil's advocate here because I don't feel like that at all.
Yeah, you've got a point. There are people who are like that, definitely.
So,
definitely.
Did you have that sort of transitional thing where you went?
No. Because I'd started teaching at 17 for the Kent Music School. So I'd already.
Well, if you survive that.
Yeah, I know.
For anybody who wants to know, Kent Music School. Yeah, don't worry. We won't go there.
Well, in those days, of course, it was Michael Wynne was director. He's a lovely man, and it was a very different beast.
It's not actually to do with the directing. It's actually to do with the way that everything is structured. It's not. I know it sounds a bit of a. Sounds like I've disagreed with myself there, but the point is that there are some really nice people who work within it.
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's always been the bean counters, I think, that cause problems with decision making and stuff like that.
The second you have a bureaucracy running an educational body, and unfortunately that's unescapable to some extent, you're going to get problems.
Yes, well, of course, the example of that at the moment, for those of you playing guitar and doing guitar exams, is effectively the LCM or West London, because obviously the RGT stuff's been taken over, and well, we'll leave that there. But again, yeah, as soon as a big entity picks something up and they start looking at numbers, it loses something, doesn't it?
People make a big mistake, and it's part of the way we're conditioned in our shopping and consumer culture, that the large organisation must be the one to go to. And in fact, in music education, quite often, it's the smaller expert you need to go and find.
Yeah, I think that's true with everything, really.
And I think it's probably the same with most things in life. But most people are brought up with this idea that you go for the big organisation because they've got the money behind them and the facilities. But that actually is just window dressing. It's not what you need to know.
But that's also true with education, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
Because in actual fact, if you think about how, everything starts, which again is another reason why I'm doing all this stuff. A lot of this starts with the way that we're educated, that we're limited immediately. We step foot inside a school. The fact that, by the time you've arrived at school, at the age of 5 or whatever it is, obviously younger in some cases now, that you can speak a language fluently, you can coordinate physically, you've got amazing social skills already that are so complex, and it's like, you're viewed as you know nothing. That's bizarre. What a bizarre way to start off. You will never learn a language as good as your first language, ever, after that period of time. But kids are treated as if they know nothing, right? And it's, you've got to listen to the expert here, right? Who's the person standing up in front of the class, right? So that attitude sort of goes through that when you've got a big company, they're full of experts.
Yes.
You see, and this is the type of thing which is, I think it's sort of problematic. So, when you look at this from a point of view of music, I've just done a little video about this actually today, about the anomaly, the thing that doesn't fit the criteria that you've been led to believe. So music, this is everywhere. You think, okay, so here's the course, go down that route, and I'll come out the other end, and I'll be able to do whatever it is, be the session player, or be the superstar, whatever. And then you go, right, well, if that's explain this one over here, this person over here who's never had a lesson, and this one over here who's never had a singing lesson, do you think, oh, this one over here can't read and write, explain that, because they suddenly appear on the scene and they turn the whole thing upside down. So I think it's obvious, because this is what we do anyway. We train people to do things through your own expertise and the way that things seem to go. What skills you need. But of course, the problem is, it's not the skills, is it? It's the stuff that people bring, use the skills in order to achieve, that makes the difference.
I think you need a phenomenal focus and dedication to survive.
Yes, I think you do.
And
or naivety.
Naivety, certain level of stupidity, maybe, yeah. And these are things you can't be taught. You just
by its very nature, naivety is something that you don't learn. But I am actually serious about that, because no one would do any of this stuff that we're involved in if they looked at the data.
Oh no, God,
right?
No, yeah.
Or listen to somebody who is logical about this stuff, because you'd think, there's no chance of me surviving in this. It's just not a goer, is it? And of course, that's the same thing that would then apply to entrepreneurial thinking or anything that's not the norm. Of what,
Yes.
Yeah, right. So, and I'm, because now I look at the way when you started off, and you went to, you know, what was it Space Tech?
Bass Institute.
Bass Institute.
Yeah.
When you started off, this was a new entity,
Yes, it was.
right?
Mm.
Now, that was the sort of halcyon days of stuff where it could have made a massive difference.
Mm.
Now, I doubt it.
No, because things have moved on. Yeah, it's not the same.
I
culture.
doubt it. And not just
Yeah,
this is not the Bass
musically.
Institute. This is anything now where any Tom, Dick, and Harry can put a course together in a college to do with blah de blah, whatever it is. So I've got people that I'm teaching. They're going off for their BTEC this and their diploma and such, and you go, right. So you're churning out all these musicians.
Yeah.
What the hell is going to happen?
Yeah. A friend of mine who's a senior lecturer at one of the conservatories in the UK. He teaches guitar, jazz guitar in a conservatoire, and he refers to it as I'm trying to remember the term he uses, a prestige degree.
Yes.
And what he means by that is that only very wealthy people, on average, afford to go to music college because they're never going to have enough money to pay off the student loan unless you come from a certain background. And so, unfortunately, what's happening, again, generalisation, is the majority of people going into music now come from a background where they can afford to go into music. The days of you go back to the late 60s, early 70s, the likes of Clapton and Beck and Page, working class guys making it to the top of the music industry is far less common nowadays.
Mm.
It's not that it doesn't happen, but it's less common.
Well, I would say that it doesn't happen.
I think you might have a case.
Because, I have.
Yeah, it's that one.
In fact, I've got several here. They've all got guitars in. Well, there was this thing a little while ago about, when you had bands back in the 60s and early 70s, they're all made up of people called, Keith and Bob.
Yes.
Harry
Dave.
and Dave and whatever, or even Kevin. But now, they're all kids that come out of public school, so you'll have,
Yes.
whoever it is, Tristan and
Yes.
whatever, or Arbuthnot or whatever. But you look at those bands that have come from public schools that you've taught in,
Yes.
public schools that
guilty,
I've taught
absolutely,
in,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then you go, right, so how does that work? Well, it's the money, they're being funded
Yeah.
by the parents to do stuff. And of course you realise that this is something which has been going on actually in acting for a while.
Oh yes.
Right?
Yes.
Where
the arts, full stop.
actors are from the family of actors, whether that's the Richardsons or whatever, but certainly if you wanted to be an actor, you often came from somewhere that they could afford for you to be an actor.
Oh yeah.
Right? I mean, and that obviously happened, that transitional thing from the the working class actor, because you had rep companies and stuff like that. Where
They've gone.
They've gone.
Yeah.
So, okay, my expertise isn't in acting in any, but you can see that those things are out there. So what I would sort of say from what you see of your pupils, because you've had a number of pupils that have gone on to amazing things.
Yeah.
What is it that you saw in them that made you go, this guy's got it?
From a bass playing, because I teach guitar as well, obviously, but from a bass playing perspective, the number one thing is enthusiasm. They've got to love it. They've got to want to do it. And then the next thing is groove.
Yeah.
Just a sense of laying down. I mean, as James Brown said, the one.
Yeah.
Nail that first downbeat, and after that, anything's game.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary how few people you teach who can groove, who can just play time.
Yeah.
And when they get it, they get it. And
Yeah.
I was thinking people that I've taught in the past, and you knew they were going to do something. I mean, I taught Yenny Tarmer, was Kylie Minogue's bass player for a long time, and Mel B's, and Rob Hudson, who was
Yeah, I know.
than other people. You could
Talk
tell
Sam, yeah.
that they were going to. Yeah, Joe Sam. Yeah, who's
Joe
with
Sam.
Sister Sledge at the moment. I
Yeah.
think. You knew they were good. You knew they were going to do something.
Yeah.
Just in terms of their personality, you could see them, but you didn't know what they were going to do.
No.
And some of them surprise you because they go further than you think they do.
Yeah.
And occasionally there's people I've taught. There was a chap I taught at one of my schools, and he didn't go into music. He's now an opera singer in Germany.
Oh, well, okay, yeah, but that's all right then.
Yeah, I mean a bass player who then became, but he was an extraordinarily good musician. He's become an opera singer.
Yeah.
I didn't see that coming.
No.
So that's the great joy of life.
Until you asked him to open the window and he sang an aria before he did it and then fell on the floor. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
My definition of opera.
Opera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to live near Glyndebourne, so.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. So I'm trying to get it out of my system.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, that there is something, and that point that you said, which sort of goes back to what I was saying earlier about the anomaly. It's almost like there's all this stuff here, but in actual fact, it's this, and that doesn't quite sit with, you know what I mean, the toolkit, because it's that other bit that the toolkit suddenly becomes like amazing with that bit, but we need that bit to get that working.
That bit is unquantifiable. It's personality. It's
I don't even know.
I don't know what it is.
I don't know what it is, because I would totally agree with you.
Because there's also part of me that doesn't like the term talent. You see, I don't like the idea. I don't think we're talent. I think we simply learn to do everything we do. Tabula rasa. We are the blank slate, and we learn to do everything.
Or actually, we're not.
but are we? Yeah.
Yeah, because you see, the other point about that is, I don't think we are a blank slate. I think in actual fact we are probably absolutely like like in James Hillman's sort of thing of it being like the acorn, that it's going to grow into something colossally amazing. Trouble is, you don't quite know what it is.
No.
That's and obviously sometimes that doesn't happen because it gets eaten up by something else. But so I would say that it's almost like the genius is sitting in people. It's a case of whether they can find it.
There's a lovely line in Frankenstein's monster in the modern Prometheus when the monster says it is not so much something learned as something remembered.
Yes. Exactly that.
You can't put your finger, and obviously with the monsters, because it is a memory from the body. But there is something in people. It's a very difficult thing to define, and anybody can be a reasonably good musician with work and practice.
Yeah,
anyone can be good enough to go on the stage and play well. But to make a success of yourself within the industry, and to have the drive, and to have the determination, you have to make a lot of sacrifices to do what we do. That's a certain personality type, probably.
I think so. I think that's a fair comment. I think that's true with lots of things. Everybody can do everything. This is a sweeping statement, but basically what I'm saying is everybody can do everything, but not everybody will be a star in it. Meaning not in the glitzy thing. I mean that they can take that thing further.
Yes.
I think that's what it is. I think we've got like you're saying, everybody can play in a band and be a reasonably good musician, but then there are others who they're in another league.
Yes.
And I think that is the thing that we sort of misconstrue when somebody goes, "Oh, I could never do that. I'm not doing blah blah blah," and that's bullshit. Everybody can do whatever they see as in their mind would be to be an artist or a musician or whatever, right? A singer or whatever. But to get that next bit is the one that where it really becomes difficult to define.
Occasionally you come across people, and I remember something a friend of mine said. He was at a party. He was a very fine jazz piano player, and I've worked with him for many years. And at this party, Dave Grusin was there. And he sat and he played duets with Dave Grusin. And he said, I'd always wondered why these guys have this reputation. And he said, when I sat down with him, and this friend of mine, he's a monster piano player, but he said Grusin just walked all over him. And I think and I've come across it a few times in my life in studio sessions, where every now and again you work with somebody who is just, they don't make mistakes. They're unnaturally brilliant. And I don't know what it is.
Mm.
They're very rare as well, even in the industry. The people that are just like machines, everything they play is superb. They're very, very rare. Often sax players, from my experience. I don't know why.
Yeah.
And I can't put my finger on what it is. I mean, I remember I had a great example when I went to Cambridge, and I'd just come off tour, and I thought I was the big I am. I really had a serious ego problem at 20, I probably still do, at 22, 23 when I went there. But there was a chap on my course, I think he plays for Blue now, he's a sax player for one of the boy bands. And he's just absurdly good. And it made me sit there. I think it's also how you perceive yourself. When I was at the college course in Cambridge, and this chap was on the course, and he was better than me, I thought, ouch, I better get my act together. This guy is better than me. Mm. And I'd had a much more successful career, but he was a better musician than me. And it made me want to learn and work harder. And I think it's how you cope with adversity. Some people, when they get confronted by somebody who is absolutely brilliant, lose heart. Mm. Other people go, well, I've got to be that good then. Mm. In fact, I never ended up being that good, but it doesn't matter. It drove me to succeed or to excel. And I think that's the point, is to drive oneself beyond what is ordinary.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you. I think, well, certainly it gives you the opportunity to blossom in a different way, because I think the biggest problem we have is ourselves, because obviously we're always coming out of a perspective of our own programming, and we need things to break that programming, whatever that is. It's a horrible word. I use a lot of computer analogies, unfortunately, because it just sort of sums up a lot of what goes on in the mind, but it's not a very good analogy. But it's that sort of thing that we have to break patterns of behaviour in order to see anything different. So so the interesting thing here now, I would say, because you were saying that obviously you've had a lot of problems with your health recently, and now you're concentrating even more on the teaching than in the playing. Where do you see what you're doing? Where's it going at the moment, or have you any particular?
It almost sounds depressing to say it, but I think simply surviving in the current climate would be something that is, in itself, is a great success. I mean, I've been doing it since I was 17, and I'm nearly 50 now, and I think to have done it that long is in itself almost the point of doing it. I don't know what the future holds for our profession or for music. There's part of me that's very depressed and worried about the future of things musically, but there's another part of me that's fully aware that things always change. So at the moment I'm really not looking to any future goal other than keep teaching, I suppose you could say, producing great students, although it's a two-way street. And I still love what I do. Even now, I go into work. I mean, I'm doing it 33 years I've been teaching. I roll into work, and I still look forward to working each day. I still enjoy each day's work. And I think that can't be bad. No. When I look at, say, I remember my father, for instance, he had an office job for years and years and years, and it really made him miserable. This 9 to 5 office job, it wasn't him, and it made him a very unhappy man. And I thought to myself, when I was a teenager, whatever I'm going to do something I love and I believe in, because I don't want to end up like that.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the only reason I do it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can see that. I mean, from my own perspective, I mean, I was always, well, Richard Bandler calls it a polarity responder. So if somebody says something to me, I will go to the opposite of that. I mean, that was particularly how I was young.
Or deliberately contrary by nature.
Yeah. Somebody said, "Oh, you wouldn't be able." That's not possible. You think?
Yes.
That's.
Oh, really?
That's really. So let's see what we can do.
I think there's a hint of that in most musicians, a certain bloody-mindedness.
Yeah, I think it has to be, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Really? I mean, I might have said this before, but I was doing a talk for the RGT one year about using sort of psychological things for assisting pupils doing exams and stuff like that. And this person said, he stuck his hand up and he went, I teach a lot of people, I teach a number of pupils who have, I don't know how he termed it, he didn't say learning difficulties. He was talking about, they have personality disorders or something like that. He termed it like that. And I went, come on. I said, anybody who sits down and practices X amount of hours a day and does this, and it reeled off all the sort of things that, musicians have to do. I said, who's normal in this room? Right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I mean, everybody was sort of started laughing, but the point was that people can easily look at things like that and go, but of course, the big selling point, I think, for music, where it's sort of offset against generally what's going on for people in their lives and education and work, is that actually you can really enjoy this stuff, which is what you're saying. You could go in and do something and really enjoy what you're doing. Now, if you didn't want to do that as a career, fine, but you could still go out and play and really enjoy it, even if you were, a bank manager or
doing it is enough.
Yes, exactly. Or nowadays you could sit and record your songs, stick them up on YouTube, and that's your musical life there. You could really enjoy doing that. The point is that there are a lot of things that people are learning, particularly in school, that are not enjoyable, and they're not going to take them to anywhere enjoyable either.
One of the problems with our academic system, particularly schools, is effectively many of our schools are producing office fodder. Their job is to produce students with one maths, one English, one science, one language to go and work in an office in a suit and tie, and that's their life over. And I remember watching that even when I was a student, but it's particularly prevalent now in the state sector. Not all schools, it depends on the school, but there is they've become factories of just production of qualifications. They're not producing rounded people. I mean, Socrates said that the whole idea of education was to produce a good citizen, to express their arete as a good citizen, a good person. And we seem to be educating people for jobs and not doing a very good job at it, where really probably our focus should be just to educate people to be better people.
Yeah, but that unfortunately has never been what's been going on in education.
No.
I mean, the days of when, if you had a privileged education and you went to do the sort of, rhetoric, theology,
sophistry,
philosophy, whatever, and then you'd go and classics, because if you could learn Greek and Latin, you could just pick up another language on the hoof, right? That was the concept.
Yeah.
And it was got nothing actually to do with educating people for a job.
No.
It was about actually being able to expand somebody's ability to think and use their mind, and then they'd be they could go off and govern some little principality in wherever it was in the empire.
That's right.
And learn all the languages out there, right? So you weren't actually being taught anything to do a job, or you just ended up, because you had your theology degree, you could do something within the church or within that become a a headmaster. You know, you think nowadays it sort of boggles the brain. How did this person end up being a headmaster when he's got a theology degree and he's, you know, Reverend so and so? You know, you go into the old public schools, it's full of Reverend so and so as the headmaster.
Oh yes, yeah,
you know, you look at this and you think, well,
Yeah.
so that wasn't. If you were privileged enough because you had a bit of money, or your parents had a bit of money, then that's how education worked. Now, that changed with education, with the sort of, you know, are the Germans building a bigger battleship than us? You know, have they got more people in? Oh my God, they're now teaching women. Oh my goodness, let's get women into education. I mean, a lot of our education history is based on looking over our shoulder to see who's chasing after us.
Not just,
is it the French or is it the, you know?
Yes,
so we look at the education system that's come from that as if it's, you know, somebody out there trying to do everybody a lot of good. In actual fact, it's not. I'm not saying it's not wrong to read and write and all the rest of it. I'm not saying that at all. But the system that it's embedded in is about making people conform.
It's counterproductive. Here's a great example. A great example of this. In the 1890s, there was Victorian reform of education, and up until 1905, because it was all basically privately run, girls and boys were educated together to the same standard. In 1905, government took over education. Government inspectors were sent into schools in the UK, and they said, "Oh my God, they're educating girls. We'd better stop that." And so politics, in 1905, stopped that freedom of education. And unfortunately, our educational system has been a political football ever since, with each political party coming into power and imposing its own ideology on education, as opposed to asking educationalists what needs to be done.
Well, even worse than that, ridiculing.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the point is, if politicians were good at education, we'd have some seriously good politicians. And there I rest my case. Because we've got, it's just diabolical what's going on. And you've got people like that who've got, you know, the likes of Gove and everything. Okay, I don't know, you know, a lot of people listening to this won't even know who this guy is, but you just think, well, how on earth do you end up with people who are in places of power who are basically imbeciles? They might be able to sort of point to something to say they've got a whatever it is, but, you know, by their own track record, wherever they go, they cause disaster, right? And they're still in places of power.
I had an interesting experience which will sum this up quite well. A couple of years ago, I went to a friend's wedding, and this friend of mine was involved in the diplomatic service. And at our table were many ex-UN diplomats, EU diplomats, the movers and shakers of the world, the people that run the world. What was interesting was the observation. Firstly, they're lovely people. They weren't unpleasant. You'd love to say, oh, they were awful. They weren't. They were very nice people. But they were actually not as well educated necessarily, or as bright, or certainly no brighter or better educated than I am, or Joe was. We were at the wedding together. And yet these people are running the world. And I thought, well, this is interesting, because in fact they're no better educated or brighter than I am. And I don't think my ego thinks that I should be running the world.
No.
And I think a lot of it is to do with belief. If in the public schools I work in, these people, a lot of the people I teach have been brought up to be the leaders of industry. They are going to be running our country and the world, and they believe it. When I work in a state sector school, they are being brought up to be office workers for the elite. Now, I say that as somebody who's come from both sides, because I went to a very rough secondary school, and I left school at 16 with no qualifications. But at 22 I was in Cambridge. I work in elite public schools, and I work in really bog standard secondary schools. So I can see it across the board. And I think we are in real danger with our education system in terms of the expectations we place on people. And unless we change that, we are going to be in for a lot of trouble in the future.
Well, the problem that I see with this, and I agree with you on here, unfortunately, it's like a lot of things where we try to change we don't change the building. We just try and tart up the outside.
Mm.
And really, sometimes a building has to be knocked down. Now, I don't know how that can be done. I don't have any answers to this, but I think there's a lot of things where we are, and this is obviously, this is not just to do with education, it's to do with the way that capitalism generates a certain type of attitude to how we deal with the environment, and it's basically eating everything that's there. That's the nature of the beast. Education is something like that. It's a self-perpetuating monster that universities have got a cabal on. To get this job, you need this bit of paper.
Yes.
And you've got to pay this amount of money. You've got to come to us. And now, they want another piece of paper. Okay, so that's not as good as the piece of paper that you needed before. So now you've got to do more and spend more money to get the extra bit. Now, if you worked in any other industry, somebody would turn around and say, "Well, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
Why don't you just get your act together and get that first piece of paper better?" Right? But it doesn't seem to work in the education system.
Education is a business,
It's
and
a
its
massive
job is to make money for the
Exactly.
institution, because the purpose of all institutions is to survive and to preserve themselves.
Exactly.
And an example of this, I found it very interesting. I was listening to a lot of James Burke's lectures. Do you remember James Burke?
Yeah.
And he was talking about how institutions, you've heard them as axe makers, that we were originally the stone axe makers were the first institutions.
Yeah.
And I think we're still there. We are still effectively...
Oh, there's nothing different.
No, we haven't moved since the
No.
Bronze Age. You read the Iliad, the passions and madness of people there is the same now.
It's absolutely, exactly. This is another bee in the bonnet that I have, when everything's looked upon like, oh, it's terrible living back then. I mean, people only lived till they were 20, and you think, really? And, or they were really stupid. They were really superstitious. Hang on a minute. Hold on. Stop there. Stop for a minute. If the Greeks had nailed all the psychological stuff, but they probably nicked it off the Egyptians, who probably nicked it off the bloody Babylonians, who nicked it off the Sumerians.
Yes.
These people weren't stupid.
No, they were
They
not.
were as highly intelligent as, probably better than, but certainly better problem solvers
Oh, yes.
than we are.
Yes.
So, that's a load of old crap. And all those people that did amazing things in their life, they were older than 20. So, come on, we've been fed so much rubbish. And you look at this and you think, but it's still going on. I was talking to somebody the other day and we were going, well, the thing that's often cited is, child mortality. The children die before. Okay, well, that's all well and good. And think, yeah, well, that's, but of course, if you factored into infant mortality, all the children that are not born now because of contraception, abortion, and factored them in. Now, I'm not saying I agree or disagree. I'm just saying data here. If you go down the Roman Catholic route of, what you should do and not do, blah blah blah, as per Pope whoever, then suddenly infant mortality is colossal because they didn't make it, or the ones that could have been here. So then you look at the data and you go, we're twisting the data around.
Well, that lovely line from Disraeli, wasn't it? There's lies, damned lies, and statistics.
Exactly.
One of my favourites for this that I found very interesting was some research that was done on sleeping pills, and this is a great example of the madness of statistics. There was a shock horror in one of the tabloid papers. We've discovered that people who take sleeping pills die much younger. Until you look at the statistic. Now, the first thing you're given if you're rushed into hospital and you're seriously ill, the first thing they give you that night is a sleeping pill. And so it immediately skews the statistics, because anybody who's terminally ill in hospital are given sleeping pills. So the statistic that sleeping pills are bad for you, well, people who are in terrible ill health are given sleeping pills in hospital. So the statistic is meaningless.
Well, there was an interesting survey about marijuana, and they did this in Scandinavia somewhere, where it was like, does marijuana cause psychotic episodes, right? So they did all this research, And they come out with this thing that there seems to be people who suffer with psychosis that they can sort of relate to marijuana often live in cities, right?
Oh, really?
So what they deduced from this was that it wasn't the marijuana that was causing the paranoia, but the people who were actually susceptible to these paranoid...
Oh yes, you have the psychosis already there to be triggered, yes,
yeah,
I know about
were the
that,
sort of people that would smoke marijuana and live in a city.
Yeah.
So you look at the data and it's a bit like, well, how do you interpret it? And there's somebody that I was listening to the other day was saying, well, there is a difference between data collection and data analysis.
Yes.
And they are very different skill sets. And that is why people who collect data, whatever that is, they could be Egyptologists or whatever, they could be great at collecting the data but not very good at being able to interpret what the data means. And I think that's where your problem, like you're saying, the Disraeli thing, of the fact that data is often used to lie your way into to prove a point. So I think with this, I agree with you totally on your last, your point about where's music going, and I think that's not just to do with music. I think it's to do with everything now. Where are we going with this? The fact that if you've been doing this for this long, that's a success. Does that mean? I reckon that there will be a lot of changes, but things might revert back to what musicians did before. It might be a case of that, and I think for me the most important thing about the music and teaching music and inspiring people to be involved in music, and I've broadened that scope obviously to sort of creative aspects of the mind. If you want to be a great artist or you want to be a dancer or a choreographer or whatever, you have to have that capacity to not think in the way you were taught to think at school.
Oh heavens,
right?
Yes.
So that's the sort of thing where and again, these systems will be in place until they're broken in such a way that we can't fix them again. And I think that's where we are with that. So as a sort of a last question, if you had a chance to see your younger self, what advice would you give yourself?
Don't do it.
Apart from don't do it.
I don't know. I have no regrets. I think I've done everything as well as I could.
Right.
It's just,
so what would you say? Don't worry.
Don't worry. Just keep doing it. Yeah. Doing it is all that matters. Yeah. I'll tell you something that's parallel to that I found very profound. I've got a student who I still teach occasionally. He's in his mid-20s now, and this is when you realise how important, how profound what we do is. And he's a rocket scientist. He works on the space project in this country. He did. And he said, do you know the reason why I did that was your guitar lessons? Right. And I said, why? He said, well, when he was a teenager when I was teaching him, he said he was very insecure, as all teenagers are, and he was uncomfortable, didn't really enjoy school or education, was getting bullied at school. And I said to him once, in Britain there's this saying that no one likes a smart ass. I said, well, I like a smart ass. I like someone who can do something I can't, or can do something well. There is a joy and a pleasure in watching someone who's just very good at something. Yeah. As Muhammad Ali said, whether it's being a bin man or whether it's being a musician, there's a joy in that. Yeah. And he said he took that, he's never forgotten it, and that was why he became a rocket scientist. Right. So the influence that we have, and the effect, and we can have an enormously profound influence.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
And that is humbling.
Yes. Well, in actual fact, you're one of the only people that it's like having a private educator, isn't it? And when it comes to music, because you're dealing with the way the mind works, because you are. How do you learn that? What is it? What's going on there? That you're actually probably in a better place than most of the teachers that they ever see to influence them in a way that's utterly profound.
Yeah, and it's very special. And I think that something you said earlier, going on a stage and asking people to admire you, wow.
Yeah, I know.
How insecure are we as musicians? What personality flaws do we have? But to realise that we have touched the lives of others in a wholly positive way, and that we've had an effect on people's lives that we don't know about for years. I had a CV and a website designed a little while ago, just a kind of work in progress, and I contacted a lot of my old students, people who've had very successful careers in the industry, some of the names we've mentioned earlier, and it was absolutely lovely hearing back from people that I hadn't seen for 15, 20 years, all saying, wow, what a difference you made in my life, in my career, without those. And I think that's why I do it.
Yeah.
That is why I will always do it.
Yeah.
And I can't see myself doing anything else.
No. Yeah, that's good.
And that's special.
Yeah, I think it's a good point to sort of end on. So if anybody wants to get in contact with you, Tony, where's your point of reference?
Well, you can go to my website,
Wow.
tonyharlow.com, which is not finished yet. Or can I give out phone numbers? Or do I should give email addresses? Do you think?
It's up to you. It depends if you want people ringing you up in the middle of the night or not, and breathing heavily down the phone.
I don't know, anything at my age.
Yeah. Email addresses are probably good, aren't they? Because obviously
email address is aharlow42, the meaning of life, aharlow42 @yahoo.com.
Cool, that's great. Well, it's been good talking to you, Tony. And well, best of luck with everything you're doing.
And for you too.
Yeah.
It's good to still be coming back here all this year after years.
Yeah,
we played together for years, and then I haven't seen you for years, and we're still doing it, aren't we?
Well, we are just about. It's great to speak to you, Tony.